Okay, let me have your attention. It looks like things are beginning to settle down. There are more leftover handouts. There are fewer people who are homeless in the aisles. So hopefully that's all starting to take care of itself. I don't have any announcements for today, so that's a pretty major accomplishment. I feel like that's a sign of good class management. That's kind of okay. So here we are. We are continuing today to talk about reference dependence. I guess I should. I feel like you. It's just ridiculously hot in here. Does anybody have any logistical questions? You've been through a problem set. Should we have a group scream about problem sets in general? Everything's going okay? Your GSIs are treating you well? Okay, good. So let me get you guys to stamp out those last few embers of chit-chat. It's kind of like, Smokey the Bear would say, you've got to stamp out your campfire completely. Okay, fine, thank you. So we've been talking about reference dependence. We're going to continue to talk about it for another couple of three Thursday today? 3 lectures. I'm really kind of hammering this preference reversals thing home. I want you to be able to see it from a lot of different angles so that you will really, part of my goal here is for you to really get that this is stuff you do understand, that you can look at this and say, oh, right, indifference curves, I know about those, are not supposed to cross. Oh, demand curves, that's right, there's not supposed to be more than one demand curve for a single individual. I'm supposed to be able to say sort of black and white concrete things about whether A is better than B, etc. So we'll hammer away on that a little bit more. And then we'll start talking about normative implications from the standpoint of how we can use our models as analytical tools, right? So I've taught 100A twice. The difference between 100A and 101A in this school, in most people's minds, is that one of them requires more calculus than the other. The real difference is in the title. 100A is called intermediate microeconomics analysis, or no, it's economic analysis micro, and the other one is economic theory micro, right? Theory is all about our mathematical models and the theories that they contain, and the theoretical statements and justifications. Analysis is also completely about our models, but it's about how we use them functionally in the real world to actually predict things and put values on things and make decisions, business-related decisions, policy-related decisions. So we're going to start talking about normative implications in terms of how we can use these things to do analysis, and then we'll start moving towards the real world and look at how reference dependence shows up in markets and in the marketplace. Everybody ready to roll? Here we go. So this is just to go back really quickly to what we did last time. Don't need to spend much time on this. So we had these two indifference curves. Here was the cash-endowed group. Here was the pan-endowed group. Fine. And we did this thing where I took you from, we've done this a couple times, right, where I took you from indifference curves to demand curves. And the last thing, I think, that we did last time was we looked at this clicker question, and I was asking you which of these sets of demand curves do these indifference curves represent. So I just kind of want to tidy this up and make sure everybody fully understands what is going on. The height of the demand curve, I'm not going to do this in a lot of detail because we've done this a couple of times. Anybody have a preference where we stick that? We've done this a couple of times. You take one of these things, and based on its slope, right, you can map out the price that people will be willing to pay for any given quantity of the good. And of course, I'm taking a shortcut because I should really be, not just looking at the slope of one specific indifference curve. When price changes without a change in income, of course, we're looking at a difference, different indifference curves within a family of indifference curves because the demand curve captures, of course, substitution and income effects. But just as a sort of shortcut way of thinking about this, you can just say, look, you can see that for different quantities of the good, people have a different willingness to pay, which is represented by the slope of indifference curves. And the thing that I wanted you to see with that clicker problem is that the fact that these indifference curves intersect isn't what we're interested in when we're shifting from indifference curves to demand curves. The thing we're interested in is their relative slope. Okay? So for any vertical slice of this, that's not a very helpful one because it doesn't include both of them. For any vertical slice, the slope of this indifference curve is greater than the slope of that one. The slope here is greater than the slope there. No matter where you slice it, it's kind of like it's like a Snickers bar, right? No matter how you slice it, it comes up that the pen-endowed people have a steeper indifference curve than the mug-endowed people. Okay, and that is because because one of them is expressing willingness to accept for a loss and the other is expressing willingness to pay for a gain. Fine. So hopefully these pieces are all starting to fit together. Again, you wind up with these two different demand curves, one of which is higher than the other because the slope of the relevant indifference curve is steeper. Good. That should now be etched in your mind. And that brings us back to this, and the question is A. I'm not going to run the clicker question again because I think we talked about that adequately last time. Where I want to go now is I want to go back to, and this is the second or third time we've sort of taken a look at this idea, what happens to our model when we try to do analysis, right, in a situation where there's possibly two different demand curves, depending upon your endowment. Okay? So let's compare these two bundles, right? We have bundle 1 and bundle 2. This is pens, but it could be absolutely anything for which you have reference-dependent preferences. So remember, as I'm sure you will, we use the area between the demand curve and the price line to measure consumer surplus, right? It's how much you would have been willing to pay if you'd been required to pay, your maximum willingness to pay, minus how much you actually did have to pay. So it's the amount of your willingness to pay that you got to take home with you, and the rest of it you left at the store because you had to pay a price. Okay, so where do I want to go with that? Let's start by, this thing is really a little bit irksome. Let's start by evaluating the comparison between these two bundles from the perspective of the dollar-endowed demand curve. So that was the lower one, right? So what do we have? Point 1 is pretty straightforward, right? Because it's a point on the demand curve. So we know that this person is getting this triangle here in consumer surplus. We'll call that A. Fine. And then the rectangle underneath that is the transfer from the consumer to the producer. For point 2, right, this person, if this person were sort of, in some sense, if they were asked to evaluate what would it be worth to them to purchase sort of the second bundle, more units of pens at the same price per pen, right? So 1 might be 5 pens for 90 cents each, and 2 might be 10 pens for 90 cents each. And we do the same exact analysis to see what the person would get out of that bundle. And for the first sort of 5 pens, they would get that same triangle, right? But for the next 5 pens, right, where's the demand curve? It's down here. Their willingness to pay is less than the price, so they would lose this much consumer surplus. Okay. So this is an extremely simple piece of welfare. This is what's called welfare analysis. We are analyzing the welfare or well-being or happiness or wealth, sort of utility outcome in dollar terms for this particular individual. All right. So the consumer surplus of a pens for mugs person at bundle 1, 5 pens at 90 cents each, is equal to A. Right. So they're buying every pen that is worth it to them given the price. And then if they were sort of forced in some sense to consume at 2, it would be a minus b, right, which is obviously less than a. Therefore, 1 is strictly referred to 2. Fine. Right? Makes sense? Basic lesson, don't buy pens that aren't worth it to you, given the price. Okay? That's what we use this model for. Super simple. Don't go to sleep. I know this is super simplistic. From the perspective of the pen endowment curve, I mean, essentially I'm just showing you the same thing I showed you with the intersect, right? We did this whole sort of preference reversal thing between two bundles using the intersecting and difference curves. It's just a different way of doing the same analysis. Okay, so for this person, the pen endowed person, the welfare analysis for point 1, right? We can say, all right, let's look at what do you get for all of these units. Sorry, I'll switch to red. Well, yeah, I get A, but that's not all I get, right? My demand curve is all the way up here, so I'm getting all of that for bundle 1. And then for bundle 2, I get, if I'm all the way out here, okay, yeah, I'm going to get that. I'm still going to get that surplus A plus C on the first 5 pens, as it were, and then I'm going to pick up this, which is my consumer surplus for the next 5 pens. And so my consumer surplus, if I'm the pen endowed person, at bundle 1 is A plus C, and at bundle 2 it is A plus C plus D, which is greater than A plus C. So we know that for this person 2 is strictly referred to 1. Why? Because 2, basically the rule of thumb here is buy all the pens that are worth it for you, given the price. Okay, right? So the bottom line is if one day you're pen endowed, and so you have the higher demand curve, I don't want to say one day. Someone called me out on that. It's not about one day versus the next day. It's about if I can change your reference point to that of a pen-endowed person, right? So your reference point is I got a bunch of pens. Then you're going to express a higher, and then I elicit your willingness to accept payment for those pens and use that as your demand curve. That demand curve is going to imply to me as an analyst that you would prefer 2 to 1, that you would prefer 10 pens at 90 cents to just 5 pens at 90 cents. If I were to elicit your willingness to pay a different way by changing exogenously, you've seen how easily I can manipulate the reference point, and I turn you into someone who is endowed with money but not with pens, so that now you're expressing the value of pens based on willingness to pay. I would estimate your demand curve here, and I would say now you prefer 1 to 2. Bottom line, as an analyst, I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. Right? What I could claim, and this is probably right under the if everything under the exact assumptions of this model, I could correctly claim that if in fact somebody was currently pen endowed, and if in fact what I was offering them was different bundles that represent different numbers of different sizes of loss, right? So if in fact I was these bundles represented losses to them, then I could use that higher demand curve to predict their choices. Right? So if in fact their reference point was 5 pens, no money, and if in fact I was asking them to value sales of pens in exchange for money, then I could predict that they would choose sort of the 10 pens at 90 cents than over the 5 pens at 90 cents. Okay? And if in fact I was offering them gains in pens relative to their reference point, I could use the lower curve to predict their choices. But if I come along and then want to say, who's better off? In which of these circumstances is this person made better off? Should they have chosen one or should they have chosen 2? What do? I say, well, actually both answers are right. You might think we're on thin ice now. We're on loose sand, shifting sand. Okay? Okay, so we get a preference reversal that we have to try to figure out what to do with. Now, let me ask you this. This is just a eye-clicker on your own, so don't discuss it among your friends. Suppose that we elicited willingness to accept and willingness to pay for an acre of wetland or marsh using contingent valuation, right, which is what we did on the second day of class with the whole wilderness, the pristine forest. Some people we would ask them their willingness to accept for a loss of wetland, and some we would ask their willingness to pay for a gain. What area in this diagram would represent the benefit to society? The value to society as a whole, right? We're doing benefit cost analysis here, so I want to know what is the benefit to society of an acre of wetland, right? So, the benefit to society. The benefit to society, let's assume that these are aggregated over the entire population, right? So which of these things represents the benefit to society? Area 2 by itself, or area 1 and 2 together, or C, D, or E? This should be about 180 people. Okay, 10 more seconds. And 3, and 2, 1, and man, I'm good. Look at that, 179. Okay, so we have some people saying 2, 1, and 2. Depends, and some impossible. Anybody jump in. I don't have a preference on the order in which we attack these things. Somebody tell me what you said and why you're right. In the back.
So I said C, and the reason I said C is because if the person thinks that they're going to lose an acre of wetland, then it's that there's an endowment effect where it goes more to them than if they were asked, okay, you want to come and you take the gain.
Okay, so did everybody hear? Say your name? Dominic. Did everybody hear Dominic's answer? Basically, it depends on whether you're being asked to give up an acre or gain an acre, and that's going to depend upon that's going to determine what you say what your value is in dollar terms. Does anybody want to make? So I claim that you are implicitly taking a philosophical stand on a particular point here. Philosophical. I don't know. Yeah, let's say philosophical. Do you agree with me? Does my statement make sense to you? Do you know what I mean? In this case, you've assumed something that isn't just sort of like an economic modeling assumption. It's kind of a philosophical statement. No? Yes? And the reading was probably written by Jack Knesch. Aha. Okay, so let's pass the buck on to Jack Knesch. Jack Knesch is implicitly taking a philosophical position, which you are implicitly accepting by giving the same answer as him, whether you intended to or not. So do you want to give us some clarity on sort of what that philosophical position is that he's taking? Right. because there's this loss aversion thing and it doesn't take that into consideration. And when people do contingent valuation surveys, they're not specifically thinking about, am I doing this contingent valuation survey for a policy of taking an acre away or for a policy of giving an acre back? The fact of the matter is, if you had to conduct a contingent valuation survey every single time you did a particular policy to determine whether really the correct endowment is that you're taking it away versus giving it back, you'd be doing an awful lot of contingent valuation surveys. And what you'd really like to do is to do one that then accounts for wetland period across all policy situations. So methodologically, his approach requires at least twice as many contingent valuation surveys, right? One for willingness to accept, one for willingness to pay. But he's also taking, maybe philosophical is too strong of a way of putting it. He's taking the loss aversion seriously, right? He says loss aversion is a legitimate preference issue, right? If people tell me that they prefer strawberry ice cream to vanilla ice cream, it is not my place as a policy analyst to argue with them about it, right? It would be very Soviet of me to then just start cranking out vanilla ice cream. This is actually completely hilarious because at the beginning of World War II, when very much what the Soviet people needed was things like boots and clothing, and food, the Soviet government was like completely crazed with pumping out ice cream because it was a way of demonstrating that they were truly an advanced nation. That's true. That's a true story. Willingness to pay, notwithstanding. So Knecht and you both are implicitly saying, I'm going to take people's this loss aversion component of their preferences relative to some reference point seriously. Let's hold that thought for a moment and we'll come back to it. Can you guess what my answer is? You guys know my agenda, right? I'm trying to tear things down. D. You think my answer is D? Well, you're right. That is my answer. Part of my goal is to actually, I'm trying to grow up. It's one of my goals in this lifetime. And part of that is I'm trying to let go of the somewhat childish idea that most economists, we teach one another this crazy idea that there's one right answer. There is no one right answer to this question. But I want to make sure that I leave you convinced that you should be confused about this. So let's do another quicker question. So here, this is Jack Knecht all the way. We're now going straight into the mind and heart and soul of Jack Knecht, who, by the way, I've met. He's a fabulous guy. I've discussed this exact issue with him. I don't believe I've ever met anybody more stubborn about the specific thing they really believe. I think that's probably a strength more than a weakness. I just happen to disagree with him. So let's just go. So here's Jack Knecht attempting to salvage the normative value of the reference dependence model, not the standard model. You can tell from his research, he doesn't like the standard model at all. He's all about reference dependence, but he wants to be able to say this model has both positive and normative validity. Okay? So here's this thing he did. Maybe you guys have already read this. I'm not sure. I don't think this was an assigned reading. So imagine the following two public works projects. These are infrastructure projects. A, widen a bridge, reducing travel time between two towns by 10 minutes. Okay. Another is repair damage to a bridge. I think I'm actually modifying his example a tiny bit. Widen a bridge, existing bridge, reducing travel time between two towns by 10 minutes, or repair damage to a bridge that was damage that was done recently. That the damage increased travel time between the towns by 10 minutes. Okay. Assume that both projects have identical costs, have identical environmental impacts, and affect identical numbers of people. Okay. Your own personal your own preferences. Imagine this is you and the Bay Bridge, right? And in one scenario, like a lane has been damaged and they're fixing it, in another they're adding a lane, but somehow magically those things have identical costs. Which do you prefer? And so I should ask, again, I sort of brought this up on the first day. Please do answer on the basis of how you actually feel about things in the real world, not on the basis of what you think I would want you to say. Or okay, there's 7 more of you. There you go. No, 3, 2, 1. Come on, there you go. 179. Have you left the room? Okay, maybe. No, there you are. Thank you. That's almost better than throwing chalk at people when they're asleep, isn't it? Oh, I'm asleep. I'm 179. Okay. So what did you say? You guys are great. I love it. Works every time. So you all would prefer to repair damage to a bridge that's recently been damaged. This is your bridge. It's been taking you 10 minutes longer than usual. Your reference point is the status quo, which is get me the hell to San Francisco so I can see my favorite band. And you want to get back to the speed you're used to doing that at. And if Caltrans magically said that for the same money as repairing one lane, they could add 6th lane to the Bay Bridge and get you to your favorite show 10 minutes sooner, you wouldn't care as much, which is true for 86 minus 58. What is that? 28 of you, or something like that. Knecht, of course, has done this. He did this exact survey, these 2 pairs of surveys, in Singapore. And I guess we're assuming that people are psychologically pretty similar in Singapore. You guys are. Is anybody here from Singapore? Awesome. Okay. Do you find that your preferences on balance have deviated dramatically from what you've observed in your classmates? Not so much. No, you guys are all hyper-rational. No, you're pretty much the same as everybody else. So it's fine that you went to Singapore. He's just dealing with human beings. All human beings exhibit loss aversion. Maybe sociopaths don't. I don't know. So basically what he says is it's exactly what Dominic said. Right? If a policy actually does cause a loss, or if it eliminates a loss, I'll get to that in a moment, value it according to willingness to accept, and if a policy causes a gain or eliminates a gain, value it according to willingness to pay. Okay? So in the road versus the bridge, it's bridge versus bridge, that's from an old version in this case. So he would say that even if the 2 policies have identical costs and identical measurable outcomes, right? The actual measured outcome is that for X number of people traveling between town A and town B, travel time goes down by 10 minutes. Okay? We should choose on the basis of loss aversion. Right? That becomes literally the deciding policy-making criterion. I can't choose between these 2 projects because they're basically observably identical, so I'm just going to ask people how they feel about loss aversion. Right? I'm trying to frame this in a ridiculous way. Okay? To some policy analysts, this approach seems odd. And then you have sort of my little excursion into the thesaurus. Now, let me say this about that. Okay? I'm a policy analyst and I'm an economist, so this is my tool. Right? These models.